afternoon, Cherries fans, and welcome to the latest Raw reaction video here on Up the Cherries in all departments. Firstly, a big thank you to our sponsors, Dental on the Banks, and here is a bit about them now. Remember to visit dentalonthebanks.co.uk for more information about what they do. Now, for this Raw reaction video to our game up in sunny Stoke, yeah, right, we have a man who you will recognise from Sky Sports. It's a pleasure to welcome onto the show, Gary Taphouse. Afternoon, Gary. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very, very good. Thanks. Just about recovered from my wet night in Stoke. Thankfully, it was really, really mild, which is extremely unusual for the Bet365. As I'm sure many of you know, it's one of the coldest grounds in the country. But although it was fairly grim conditions, I didn't even need a coat, and I'm a proper soft southerner. So yeah, it was good. It was good. Thank you.
Excellent. So we've had a fantastic start to the season. Us Cherries fans are absolutely delighted, and a ninth win. And we've drawn the other 4. What have you made of our start and our ability to beat the best teams in this league?
Well, first thing to say, Craig, is although I'm not a Bournemouth fan, I do live in Bournemouth, so it's in my interest for the Cherries to do well, because obviously if they're in the Premier League, it means more games for me close to home. So for purely selfish reasons, I do desperately want them to get promoted. Yeah, really, really impressed. It's no surprise to me either, because I do know Scott Parker. We were near neighbours when I lived in Cobham in Surrey, and I was actually working at Chelsea Football Club when he signed at Stamford Bridge. So I got to know him there. I'd always see him around and about in town in Cobham with his family. And I always thought he'd go on and be a manager. That was always one of his ambitions. And I just think he's absolutely brilliant. I've no doubt at all that he's going to get the job done this season. I think he's got a really good staff around him. And I just love the identity that Bournemouth have got this season. They've just got a real touch of class. What I love is it can seem that nothing's happening. They're just passing it along the back 4, and it's all very calm and slow. And then suddenly, 3 passes later, they're in. And they move the ball really quickly suddenly. There's an awful lot of lovely tricks and flicks in there as well, which you don't expect. And they're not just showboating. It really is to open defences up. So I think what he's done there in quite a short space of time is absolutely brilliant. And it's no surprise to me that they're where they are. Great to watch, really entertaining, but it's possession with progression as well, as Arsene Wenger used to say. It's not just passing the ball for the sake of it. And I love the way that he's introduced younger players and blending them with the familiar faces from the past as well. So it's very hard to find anything negative to say about Bournemouth at the moment, which is great. I think the only thing he would say probably is there's one or two games, and you'd probably agree with this, where they've been drawn and they probably should have been wins. But listen, you're really clutching at straws. You'd have to give it 9.5 out of 10 so far.
Yeah, definitely. And I think those two games that you allude to, Blackpool at home, really we should have taken the 3 points there. Also, Peterborough, we should have really put them to the sword as well. And to be honest, Hull as well, we could say that, really we should have actually finished the job up at Hull, but it's the 3 promoted sides that we've drawn against, plus West Brom.
You're being greedy though, aren't you?
Yes, yeah. What if we won those 3? Well, where would we be? Yeah.
Well, it would almost be over, wouldn't it? You'd almost have it wrapped up with a quarter of the season gone.
Yeah, well, we're a third of the way there in my eyes.
Yeah.
I think 90 points, without a shadow of a doubt, will seal promotion for us. As you mentioned, you were up in Stoke covering the game. Before the match, what did you think of the challenge that they presented?
Interesting, because I really like Michael O'Neill as well. And I know he can be perceived as a little bit of a cautious, circumspect coach. But actually, the way Stoke have played this season has been quite exciting to watch. So I've got to be honest, I was expecting this to be a really good game. And I think, unfortunately, I'm talking as a neutral here, when you've had an international break and then you've played on the Saturday and you've got a quick midweek game coming up on the Tuesday, that midweek game can often be a little bit of a damp squib. And I thought in the first half, that was a little bit what we got. He made a subtle change, didn't he, Michael O'Neill, because he opted not to go for the 2 number 10s either side of Jacob Brown. He put in an extra midfielder in Thompson, Jordan Thompson, who I really like, by the way. So it was a slightly more cautious lineup. I think he just wanted to stop Bournemouth playing, quite honestly, because he's probably weighed it up and said, we're doing well, but we're not as good as Bournemouth, so we have to try and stop them. I think that's probably the right way to go, because there wasn't a lot in it in the first half. Bournemouth were the better side, but they hadn't created an awful lot. So I thought it would be a very tough test. I have seen a couple of Stoke games this season. They have been, they've been very, very good to watch. Perhaps not scored as many goals as they wanted. They've been alternating, haven't they, between Jacob Brown and Sam Surridge up front. I think Sam Surridge was desperate to start the game for obvious reasons. And he talked about the difference between them before the game, actually. He said, Jacob Brown is scoring a lot of goals from sort of the edge of the box and doing a lot of good runs. What he's lacking is the poachers' goals at the moment, whereas Sam Surridge is actually the opposite. He gets a lot of the 6-yard 6-yard box goals, and is perhaps working on other areas. So eventually he had them both on, didn't he, out of desperation. So yeah, listen, I think Stoke have got an identity as well. He's gone with wing backs and 3 central defenders. He likes his midfielders to slide those balls inside the fullbacks to the wing backs, bombing forward. That's worked really well for them this season. I really like Vrancic, who they picked up from Norwich. He will play as one of those 2 number 10s when they do play that system. And I do think they've got a chance at the playoffs for sure this season. It might be a bit too soon when you look at what's happened to them since relegation. 3 finishes, sort of 14th, 15th, 13th. Maybe this season might be a bit too soon for them for promotion, but they are definitely heading in the right direction. And if you talk to Stoke fans, I think they feel a lot more optimistic for the first time, really, since they've been relegated. So I thought it would be a really tough game for the Cherries. And obviously, they did have a couple of scares, didn't they? Jordan Thompson hit the inside of the post, rolled along the line. I mean, on another day, that goes in. So, it was a tough challenge, but it was just about getting over the line, and they did it.
And of course, Ryan Christie was fantastic yesterday. He had that shot, which Solanke then nipped in. It was a tap in the end, but you got to be in the right place to score them. But what sort of impact do you think Ryan Christie's had? Because he's had 5 assists in 7 games.
Yeah, well, funnily enough, the one last night, I'm not sure if it will be officially an assist. If the goalkeeper then touches it, I think they sort of cruelly might take it away. I consider it to be an assist, and I'm sure you do. Listen, I spoke to a few people from Bournemouth beforehand, and they all said to me, watch Ryan Christie because he's been absolutely brilliant. He hasn't scored yet, but the work he's done for the team has been top class. I mean, what a signing, what a bargain. I know he was in the final year of his contract, so obviously the price was going to be lower. But £2.5 million in today's market for someone of his quality, and there were plenty of other clubs interested, by the way. This is where Bournemouth have sometimes got an advantage because I think, you bring players down, and I only live 5 minutes from the beach, and I'm seduced every time, and I'm sure it's the players. I'm sure it's the same for the players. They must just think, why would I want to live anywhere else? And I think Burnley were very interested. And listen, I love going to Turf Moor, but if it's a choice of Bournemouth or Burnley, I know which one I'm choosing. So yeah. He's made very much the sort of impact that I would have expected. I think he's only going to go from strength to strength. What I love is it's not just about beating players, it's about making the right decision at the end of it. And he seems to do that more often than not. I mean, I was working with Keith Andrews last night, and he's a massive, massive fan of Christie. And, he bigged him up to me as well before the game. So, yeah. It's no surprise, is it? But I think he has just hit the ground running. I'm sure he's going to be a huge influence for the rest of the season. And what an astute bit of business. You can't help but be impressed.
And defensively, we look really, really good because last season we were a little bit suspect at set pieces. Defensively now, we look so much more assured with Cahill coming in as well. Another great bit of business by the club.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of Gary Cahill in the last few years. Actually, Palace is another club that I cover quite a lot, just for geographical reasons. And I think a few people at Palace were really hoping that he would commit to another year. I think he wanted 2 years, and obviously another 2 years in the Premier League at his age might have been pushing it. I'm not saying it would be pushing it because I think he is incredibly fit. He had 1 or 2 injuries as well at Palace, which might have had an impact. But he's just so solid, isn't he? So calm, so assured. Again, decision making. It's just instinctive with him after so many years playing at the top level. And I love the partnership with Lloyd Kelly as well. They just get on with it, don't they? They're very, very. It's just quiet, assured. You just feel very, very confident with those two getting the job done. And it's no surprise that they haven't conceded a goal away from home since August, really. I mean, I say it's no surprise. It's an unbelievable achievement over 9 hours. I think it's 9.5, isn't it now? If you just think about that, I mean, that is actually incredible. And actually in that time, there've only been a handful of scares. So obviously the longer that continues, the further the lead's going to be at the top of the table. Gary Cahill, absolutely brilliant. And I think, again, it's just about that blend, isn't it? The young players who've come in, you mix that with the likes of Gary Cahill, and it's a winning combination. And he just seems to be, like I say, getting the job done in a very quiet, no-nonsense way.
And of course, the youngsters as well. So we've got Travers, Kilkenny, Zemura, Anthony, and of course Ibsen-Rossi, who was playing at the start of the season, of course, has had to play second fiddle now to Gary Cahill. But what do you make of them? It's been brilliant.
Well, first of all, Zemura, I mean, he just looks like he's been playing for years, doesn't he? Absolute quality. I mean, you forget he's a fullback half the time because he seems to spend so much of the time high up the pitch. Absolutely love him. And I'm sure the Bournemouth fans just adore him, to be honest, because he's got that eye for goal as well, hasn't he? The goal he scored at the weekend, absolutely brilliant. And he got into a similar position, didn't he, at Stoke? I thought he was going to try the same thing. I think he's absolutely brilliant. Yeah. Did I think it was a penalty? Yes, I did. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one where, personally, I'm grateful VAR isn't in the Championship, but I think in that situation, that might well have been given. I think that's one where they would have definitely asked the referee to have a look at the screen. I was surprised that wasn't given. Yes, some of the other ones you mentioned there, Craig?
So Travers,
Travers,
of course.
yeah. Kilkenny's another one. I mean, obviously Keith was keeping an eye on those two because he's assistant manager for the Republic of Ireland, so he was doing a bit of double bubble there, keeping an eye on those two. I was perhaps a little surprised that Gavin Kilkenny kept his place because obviously he'd been out for a while. He came back at the weekend, and you looked at Stoke away and thought, well, actually, that's perfect for Ben Pearson. But he kept his place and he did another brilliant job. Again, he just looks very, very calm and assured in that position. Got booked very early on, didn't he? Which was a worry. I think it was inside 3 minutes. And you thought, well, in fact, I said it during the commentary, didn't I? For his position, that's not ideal. But he didn't put a foot wrong after that. Travers, I think again, we've seen him play in previous seasons, and I think it was always obvious he was going to be a really, really good goalkeeper. And he didn't really have a lot to do, did he, last night, to be honest? Everything he did do was very, very calm and assured again. So, and yeah, some of the other youngsters you mentioned at the start of the season got an opportunity, and obviously they're finding it hard to get a chance now because more senior players are back and they're doing a great job. But as we know, Scott Parker really does like young players. He's not afraid to introduce youth. He was a very young player himself when he came through and did a fantastic job. So I'm sure we'll see them. I'm sure we'll see them again for sure. But right now, I mean, I think you can't really argue with anything Scott Parker's doing because he's making all the right choices.
And of course, that Zemura-Anthony partnership on the left-hand side as well has been fantastic. Anthony looks a really, really good player. And do you feel that might have been an issue for Jason Tindall and Jonathan Woodgate last year, that they didn't bring these players in when Scott Parker's, to be fair, against West Brom, his hand was a little bit forced, but he didn't seem to have that fear that maybe Jason Tindall and Jonathan Woodgate had bring them through.
I think last season, I think Woodgate in particular was all about trying to get the job done, wasn't he? I think he was leaning on his senior players to try and get them over the line, and I can understand why he was a bit hesitant to rely on youth in that situation. It's slightly different from the start of the season, maybe. As you say, his hand was forced, so I don't want to dig out Jonathan Woodgate and Jason Tindall. It was a difficult season at times last campaign, and I think the bottom line is they've ended up with the right man. Obviously, disappointment with the playoffs last season, but actually in the bigger picture, it might turn out to be a blessing because I think you've now got the right man in the dugout for when you do go up. He's got that experience in the Premier League as well. So, sometimes these things, it's painful in the short term and works out better in the long term. And I think that might end up being the case here, to be honest. And you talked about that partnership down the left-hand side. I'm a huge fan of both Zemura and Anthony. Again, just some of those exquisite bits of skill we saw from Anthony down that left-hand side last night. I mean, that's why we love football, isn't it? To see those moments of, it's almost like he's just playing in the park with his mates. And he's not, they're talking about the top of the Championship, and he was just pulling off those moments with breathtaking ease. And again, both those guys are only going to get better. And particularly with the top coaches they've got around them at the moment. So, like I say, the future is just so bright, and it's very, very hard to come up with notes of caution, to be honest, because everything is just going Bournemouth's way at the moment.
When we look at the next two, so we've got Huddersfield at home this weekend, and then we've got the following weekend, Reading away. Two sides around the playoffs, not in them, but around the playoffs. Do either of them pose much threat?
Well, exclusive news. I'll be commentating for Sky on the Reading away game as well. So really, really looking forward to that. Yeah, I think that's going to be interesting, isn't it? As you say, they're kind of two teams who are hoping to challenge for the playoffs. I'm not sure they're going to get there. I mean, poor old Reading have had so many disappointments in the playoffs, haven't they?
Yeah.
Over the last 7 or 8 years. You can't help feel that they're a little bit in the doldrums. Huddersfield obviously have been in Bournemouth's situation of having the Premier League experience, coming down and then struggling. Listen, I think Bournemouth will look at it and say that we've got to get 6 more points from those two, because the teams behind Bournemouth are going to carry on winning. It's funny because I've seen a lot of West Brom as well, and although they're right up there, I don't see them being in the same league as Bournemouth at the moment. They're quite disjointed at times, and they're getting the job done, but I don't think they're as enjoyable to watch as Bournemouth are. And I just wonder over the long term of a season whether they're going to be able to keep snatching those 3 points from games that are very, very tight. Like I say, I'm really looking forward to that Reading away game. I haven't been there since Reading were last in the Premier League, which seems a long time ago now, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And like I say, it still seems to me that they're a long way from getting back. Whereas I look at Bournemouth and I can only see one outcome this season. So I know Scott Parker will be thinking this is 6 points. We've got to try and get. It's never that easy. We know this league, the relentlessness of it, the unpredictability of it. And listen, Bournemouth are going to concede away from home. They are going to drop points. We all know that. There are going to be games where you'll come away thinking, what on earth happened there? But I think more often than not, it's going to be 3 points. And I'd be very surprised if they didn't get at least 4 points in these next 2 games. I wonder if they take that, with the lead they've now got, keep the unbeaten run going. Obviously, they'll want 6 points. Fans are greedy, coaches are greedy, players are greedy. And so, they should be winning both games. But let's see. As I say, I'm really looking forward to that trip to Reading. Another one under the lights, another one live on Sky. So, good stuff.
With Reading as well, they might get a possible points deduction. I know it all depends as well, because Derby have appealed theirs. So I'm guessing that they're sorting out at the EFL, sorting out the Derby situation before they focus on Reading. And I think there's even more clubs that are under that cloud that they might get pulled up for FFP.
It's messy, isn't it?
It is, yes. Yeah. What do you think is going to happen to Derby and Reading? Do you think Derby will keep their 12-point deduction? Do you think it might even be more because of the suspended 9 points, or that is all ongoing in the background? And what do you think about the Reading?
It's very difficult to speculate, isn't it? Because there'll probably be challenges to it. You wonder if the EFL are entirely sure at the moment. It's a very, very difficult situation. The Derby one, listen, they're going to do all they can to fight it for sure. And you can only be impressed with the reaction they've had since getting that deduction. You've just got to pile the praise on Wayne Rooney, haven't you? Because he could easily have walked away from that horror show of a situation. And instead, he's really got his head down, knuckled down and got results. So, whatever you might think about Wayne Rooney's inexperience as a coach, you can only praise him for what's happened since that points deduction, because the club's in turmoil. And he's just getting on with his job. And the players as well. It's almost galvanized them, hasn't it? I was looking at the table just before you called, and I was thinking, you know what? They're really getting closer and closer to safety, despite that big deduction. Obviously, if there was then another 9-point deduction on top of that, you'd think, well, that is just a body blow. That's too much. And obviously, they'll fight that as much as they can. And the other clubs involved that you mentioned, I think it could be a bit protracted, and it's not ideal for the league, is it? Because you then suddenly have asterisks by everything. So let's hope it gets sorted. And we just want fairness, don't we? That's the thing. Yeah. We don't want people to be trying to bend the rules, and we want the rules are there for a reason, and we want people to abide by them. So fingers crossed it all gets sorted.
And I think with the clubs, some of the clubs in the league, because of the teams coming down from the Premier League and the parachute payments, some clubs just gamble at trying to get into the top flight, like Derby have done, like Reading have done to an extent. There's a lot more that you could also name as well, and a couple more with those clouds over them. But like you say, we've been there before with minus 17. Recently spoken to Steve Fletcher as well, so that's coming up as well. But yeah,
Love
it's
Fletch.
horrible. Yeah, he's an absolute legend.
I've got to just say there on Fletch, I'm completely going off the subject, but it really reminded me when I was at uni. I went to Bournemouth Uni, Craig, and until then I'd never been to Bournemouth. I knew nothing about it, basically, as a town. And in my final year at Bournemouth Uni, I actually got the opportunity to commentate on the home games. This was late 90s. And it was obviously at a time when the club was in massive doldrums, buckets in the Winter Gardens trying to save the club. And it was fantastic to be right in the thick of it at that time as a final year student. And obviously I wasn't being paid to do it. It was just something that I was conscious that I wanted to do. And I was very, very lucky that I was in the right place at the right time to say, yes, I'll give that a go. And anyway, Fletch was always the player who we'd interview afterwards because he had an interest in that media side of things. And of course, he was a brilliant ambassador for the club. Even when they'd been beaten, he was really happy just to come out and say all the right things on behalf of the players. And so I got to know him quite well. And it was really, really lovely to catch up with him again. I don't know if you remember, there was a charity match at Wimborne, and Eddie Howe was one of the managers. And it was fantastic to catch up with Fletch there because I was I was the MC for that game. And I asked him if he remembered about it. He goes, well, I do, because that was something that I was very proud to do. So, yeah, for him, for me, an absolute legend. And obviously for all Bournemouth fans, an absolute legend. And it's wonderful that he's still there, isn't it? And still performing a great job. And I know what a good talker he is. So I'm sure his pod will be much more interesting than this one.
No, honestly. Some great stories that he come out with as well. So yeah, he was really, really interesting. Of course, we've signed Robbie Brady as well. What do you think, he can offer, which is different to what we've already seen?
Well, again, first of all, there were other clubs interested there. And again, this is something I was talking to Keith about with his Ireland connections. I think it's a really, really astute signing. Again, at this level, he's going to take a little bit of time to get match fit, obviously. And I think his family's still in the Northwest, isn't it? So he's got a bit to sort out personally. But I listened to his interview, and again, he's just got that calm assuredness of a senior pro. And it's another option out wide, isn't it? It's an embarrassment of riches, really. But we know what it's like. Again, the Championship, injuries, suspensions, loads of games. To have another option like him to come in, can only be a blessing. And to pick him up in October because he's out of contract. He's been waiting for the right opportunity. It's. He's essentially been on the sidelines, just keeping himself fit, waiting for the right opportunity, and this is it. So, great signing for me. Let's see how it works out, but I'm sure Scott Parker is absolutely delighted to have someone of his experience to come in between the windows and give him yet another option. Because, like I say, players will drop out for various reasons. And yes, there's a lot of good young players to come in, but to have that option as someone of his experience, not just at this level, but in the Premier League as well and internationally, I don't see how it can be anything other than a good thing. So, it kind of came out of the blue, didn't it? It was funny to see the tweet from the club. I wasn't anticipating it at all. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant for the club.
And he's a very flexible player as well. We've got so much strength in depth. We do have a couple of injury problems, and of course, David Brooks as well, and that awful situation that he's had to go through. recently, and hopefully we all wish him well, and fingers crossed he'll be back on the pitch as soon as possible.
Yeah,
very quickly
absolutely
before
agree with that.
Very quickly before I let you go, Gary,
Yeah.
who would you say is going to be the top three this season, and who do you think might drop into League One?
I mean, it's difficult, isn't it, with only a quarter of the season gone? But having said that, the table is just starting to take shape. You know, there've been some surprises this season, and you know, maybe the biggest one is Coventry. Talking to a few of, I did their game against Forest, their first game back at their stadium. I was very fortunate to be there for Sky, and what a day that was, by the way, because they came from behind to win it in deep into stoppage time. You might remember, and that's kind of kick-started them. And I was talking to some fans before that game, and they were very much like, well, as long as we stay up, we're happy. And then suddenly they've got this perfect home record, 18 points out of 18, and they're right up there. So there have been some surprises this season. Having said that, there's no doubt in my mind that Bournemouth are going up. I don't want to jinx anything, but to me, they are the best team by a mile. And it's interesting beyond that. I've already said to you, I'm not entirely convinced by West Brom. I'm not entirely convinced by Fulham, to be perfectly honest. They seem to be very, very up and down. You know, they'll have a fantastic victory and then they'll drop points against Blackpool and Coventry as they did. So it really is up for grabs, I think, second place. Perhaps in the end, one of Fulham or West Brom will take it, and then it's a real lottery for the playoffs. As for going down, well, I've already mentioned Derby. Assuming they don't get another points deduction, I've just got a feeling that they aren't going to do enough because of the way they've responded. And then beyond that, I mean, Peterborough, you know, they did so well to get promoted, but it has been a struggle, hasn't it? Let's be honest.
Yeah.
And you've got to worry about Cardiff as well. You know, it's defeat after defeat for Mick McCarthy, and you can't help feeling there might be a change there at some point. The longer they let this situation go on, the more concerned I would be that they are going to get sucked right into it. And obviously the other team I've got to mention is Forest, because I mentioned that opening day. And obviously there was a desperate start to the season under Chris Hughton for whatever reason. And then Steve Cooper's gone in there, and the results and performances have just completely turned around. And I'm certainly thinking that they are dark horses for playoff place as well. So as ever, the Championship is a great league, great stories at both ends. You know, this is why we love it as a league. I mean, you know, those predictions might end up being totally wrong, but that's what I'm looking at the moment for sure.
Well, it's so open, and there's always a dark horse, isn't there? I said at the start of the season, and I was surprised actually. I thought Forest would actually be in the mix as well, Gary. At the start, I'm a bit disappointed for Hughton, because
me too.
He's a lovely guy.
He's a great guy, good coach. For whatever reason, and you know, Chris isn't the only one who struggled there, by the way. For whatever reason, it just didn't work out. And I think you've just got to hand all the praise to Steve Cooper. And I was surprised he was out of work for the amount of time that he was after leaving Swansea. I'm sure he had offers. For whatever reason, it wasn't until the Forest job came up that he was back in work. He's quite obviously a brilliant coach. And clearly, you only got to listen to the players at Forest to understand that they have bought into what he's trying to do straight away. And they've got a good squad there, haven't they? I think you know, they've got some brilliant young players, and they've got a lot of pace in that team. I really like Mighton and Johnson in that side. They grace any team in the Championship for me. So, and he's even got Lyle Taylor scoring, which a lot of Forest fans were thinking, was that ever going to happen again? So, yeah, I agree with you. I'm backing them for the playoffs all the way. And then, as you know, once you're in the playoffs, crazy things happen, and it's not always fair. So let's see. I mean, Forest have had a very, very long wait to get back into the Premier League. You know, it's getting on for decades, isn't it, rather than just years now. So, so yeah, I think that could be very, very interesting. Keep your eye on Steve Cooper. He's a really, really, really good manager.
Well, fingers crossed you're right with your first prediction. We can get
Yeah,
straight
I've
back
no
into the
doubt on
Premier
that
League
one.
as champions as well. That would be nice. As champions, another celebration down the beach for you to cover.
Yeah, and as I say, from a purely selfish point of view, I really do want that. Last time they were in the Premier League, and obviously it was a horrible, disjointed season because of COVID, but I think I was there for over half of Bournemouth's home games because it's, geographically, it makes sense to try and keep commentators near to where they live because of particularly during the pandemic, because of travel restrictions. I've got to be honest, I was totally devastated when they got relegated, and then B, didn't get promoted. So I've really got my hat on them for this season. And like I say, I think they've got the right man in the job. I really love the way the team are playing. I love the blend of youth and experience. They're great to watch. I mean, for me, they're going to go up. It's just you just have to hope that there's no unforeseen difficulties further down the line, as can happen in the Championship. But I've got no doubt they're going up.
I did ask somebody this the other day as well. Do you think we can get the points record?
Well, steady on. I mean, one thing at a time. But things like that are nice bonuses at the end of it, aren't they? Which we can start to look at. But I think, listen, if I said to you, I can guarantee you second place in the table right now, I'm sure you'd take it, because that's all that matters is going up. Everything else after that is a bonus. But listen, I wouldn't rule it out. I really wouldn't rule it out. They're just not conceding goals, Craig,
Yeah.
And they're not looking like they're going to concede goals. So it's not like they're especially prolific. But if you don't concede goals, then you can nick games all the time. So, it's that experience of the Championship and that Scott Parker's got and that the players have got. It's all going swimmingly at the moment. Long may it continue.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this raw reaction video, Gary. It's been really insightful, and all the very best, mate.
Cheers, Craig. All the best.
Thank you, everybody, for joining me on this raw reaction video. Please do remember to hit the like, the subscribe, and the bell button below to be alerted to when we release any new videos. Please do remember to check out our interview with Steve Fletcher that is going to be coming up at 7 o'clock today. Also, please do check out our raw reaction videos after the QPR and Nottingham Forest games earlier on in the season. One was with Jeff Stevenson from Only Fools and Horses, and the other was with Mr. Dorr. Also, please do check out our other interviews that will all be listed on the channel as well. Many thanks again for joining me on this raw reaction video, and I'll see you in the next one. Up the cherries.